Parts of a castle. Where did knights live? A castle, of course. Actually, castles were never built to serve only as a home for a king or a lord. A castle functioned primarily as a fort for protections of its residents. A castle's purpose was to provide defense and offense during wars. Stone castles were built as high as an 8-story building and could be as long as a city street. Living inside the castle was not very cozy. The castle was cold, drafty, and had few decorations or comfortable furniture. Warmth was provided by fires lit in fireplaces, and tapestries were hung on walls more for keeping out the cold than for beauty. The castles had few glass windows, so it was very dark inside. Servants slept on the cold floors, and knights slept on tables in the great hall, and only the lord and his lady had their own bedroom in the keep. Let's look at the differences between moat and bailey castles and the 13th century castles. The early medieval castles were called moat and bailey castles. They were usually made of wood and earth. They were uncomfortable and crowded places to live. They had no plumbing, and fresh water was difficult to find. Servants usually threw herbs on the floor in an attempt to mask the bad smell. A moat was a mound of dirt and rock constructed in order to raise the level of the castle, and this provided additional protection against invaders. The keep is the stronghold of the castle built on top of the moat. The bailey. This is the wider area of land next to the moat. It included a kitchen, stables, workshops, chapel, and residence for peasants and workers. The drawbridge can be drawn back or raised to prevent the moat from being crossed in case of an attack. The drawbridge usually connected the moat and the bailey. The moat or ditch. A man-made body of water that surrounded the moat and the bailey made it difficult for enemies to reach the castle and surrounding buildings. Now let's look at the 12th and 13th century castles. The building techniques had improved and became more sophisticated. Stone walls replaced wood and earth walls because all stone was stronger and it lasted longer. And it kept the castle warmer in the winter. Plus, most wooden castles were easy to attack because they could be burnt down. Now, we're going to be looking at the different parts of the castle. Let's take a look at the different parts. Here we have the rocky ledges right along the edge. A rocky ledge was important for the placement of the castles. Castles built of rock could not be seized by tunneling. Our moat, the ditch around the castle, and it was usually filled with water, but could be filled with other things as well. The wall or curtain, which is right here. I know it looks like it's being pointed here, but it's this one right in here, all of this. This is called the wall or curtain. It was sometimes called a curtain, and it was surrounded it surrounded the courtyard of the castle, more than 10 feet in thickness. So this is what it talks about when we're looking at rocky ledges. It was really difficult to tunnel through and under, which was one of the main strategies of taking over a castle. And here we see a moat surrounding the castle. Moats could be small, but usually they were about the size of a good sized pond around the castle. And here we're looking at the wall right in here. All of this is the wall that surrounds the entire castle. You can see it over here in the background. Next, we have the gatehouse, which is right here. This was a gatehouse was a living quarters over the main gate of the castle. In the beginning, the gatehouse was the most vulnerable part of the castle, but it became heavily fortified in the end. The drawbridge could be raised or lowered. It was usually located right over the moat. Here's what the gatehouse looks like. This is usually where you kept your weapons and for easy access of any attack. And here we see the drawbridge. And another picture of the drawbridge. It was usually pulled up with chains and a pulley system. The barbican. So a barbican is a forward gate of the castle located before the main gate. It offered extra protection since the weakest part of the castle was considered to be the gate. The portcullis. This is the main gate of the castle. It was made of very heavy wood and was reinforced with iron grating. It could be raised or lowered for the protection of the people inside. So here's what a barbican looked like, usually made out of wood. This was the most vulnerable part because they could get a battering ram and ram into it and break that one open. This was the strongest one of the gates because this was usually made out of some type of iron. Murder holes. These holes are holes in the ceiling just after the first gate. The holes were used for dropping large stones on attackers who got through the front gate. Arrow loops. These are narrow openings in the castle's towers through which archers fired their arrows on the enemies below. So these ones right here are the murder holes. You'll see them underneath castles as you enter through the gates. And here you can see the arrow loops right in here. There's several of them. They're very thin because there was usually a person back there with a bow and arrow, and they only wanted it big enough for that arrow to come out. Parapets, the low part of the top edge of the tower or castle wall. Machicolations, the reason the parapets were built. They were holes in the parapets used for dropping all kinds of things such as boiling oil, hot water, and stones. Corbels. These are stone projections in the walls which acted like brackets to support the parapets. So here are the parapets. These are the openings, these cutouts right in here, all of these. And this is where knights would hide up and protect themselves against things that were projecting towards them, such as arrows. They would also throw out those hot boiling oil or water off this edge. These are the machicolations, and you would find them at the very edge of the wall, and they were able to throw rocks down from them or hot oil or water. These actually just supported them, and they usually decorated them with some kind of funky design. this one's even holding a violin. It's a little person holding a violin and two people kissing. This right here, this whole area right here is called the Outer Bailey. This is the first courtyard in the outer wall. The Inner Bailey. This is the inner courtyard. It was protected by two walls. So here you have those two walls protecting the Inner Bailey. And here we have the keep. It was the strongest and most heavily fortified part of the castle, as it was designed to be the last line of defense. The keep usually housed the owner and his family. It was also where the Great Hall was often located. So our Outer Bailey is here. Don't mind the cars. They didn't have cars back then. So all of this is the Outer Bailey, the outer courtyard. Right in here, you have the Inner Bailey. And as you can see, here's the keep. So these are the two walls, very thick. You've got one wall in here, and there was usually a hall down in this area, and then there was a second wall right in here. And here's what a keep would look like. The spiral staircase was to throw off the person who was coming up the staircase or going down the staircase. And they usually spiraled to the right because most men were right-handed. And this really made it very difficult for them to use their sword, and it was a defense mechanism or offense, depending on if you're attacking the castle or protecting the castle. The postern gate was a back gate. It was supposed to be a secret, but oftentimes was not. The gate was used for attacking and surrounding the enemy outside the castle as an escape, or for coming and going of scouts and spies. So here's a view of the postern gate. Usually there would be a drawbridge or some type of boat that you can get across the moat with. To enter the castle, the knight would have to cross the drawbridge over the moat. The drawbridge was connected to the outer wall surrounding the castle, called the bailey. At the end of the drawbridge, built on top of the bailey, was a gatehouse. Before a knight could enter the courtyard or the outer bailey, he had to pass through a portcullis, which was the heavy wooden gate. Once he crossed the outer bailey, he would ride up to the keep. The keep, again, was where the lord and his family lived and was also the safest place in the entire castle. The Great Hall could be located in the keep or in a separate building. In the earliest castles, great halls were used for eating and sleeping. Later, they were used for entertaining and holding court. They usually had high ceilings and large fireplaces. The floors were usually dirt or stone. Religion was important in everyday life during the Middle Ages. People went to church every day. Most castles had their own chapels. And the chapel could be a simple room in the keep, or it can be an elaborate separate building. Storage of food, beverages, and gold was usually in the lower levels of the keep. A dungeon was built in the basement of the keep, and it was originally for the lord's protection, but later it was used for prisoners. Toilets were mere holes in the towers. Waste dropped below, either into the bailey or in the base of the outer wall, or into the moat or cesspools contained within the tower.